I don't know what to say other than I'm worried. Extremely so. I've had trouble sleeping for the past 5 days because it's the third time one of my friends disappeared in a month. Since we had that party about a month ago, I lost 3 friends. I'm a good neighbor, okay? Before anyone wants to jump down my throat for being a disrespectful neighbor, I want you all to know that this isn't that type of story. See, I cut my grass every 10 days, and I do it at the appropriate hours. I never host late-night evening parties without mentioning it to my closest neighbors first, and I always try to keep sound at a minimum past 11 p.m. I don't do anything that could set me up for bad neighbor relationships. So you see, I kind of warned my neighbor a few days before the party, letting him know that we were celebrating my friend's 27th birthday. He told me it was no big deal with a smile, and even said he would lend me his large smoker grill because I only have a small one, an offer I didn't refuse because we were going to have about 12 people, and grilling 12 burgers and hot dogs on my small 2-person barbecue would take forever. I would have made it work with lots of beers and side stuff, but having that barbecue was a lifesaver. All in all, I was pretty sure he was okay with it. Hell, it seems he even wanted to make it better. I've invited him for a burger and a beer to thank him, to which he replied that it was appreciated, but he just wanted us to have a good time. Now, to me, it just sounded like the guy thought he would be too old or unwelcomed, so I didn't press the issue. Maybe I should have, I don't know. Anyway, we had the party, and it was a success, and we're not raging party monsters, so we didn't keep the music going super late. At 9 p.m., we turned it down and started a small fire, gathered around for beers and stories. And sure, we stayed up until 1 or maybe 2 a.m., but other than a burst of laughter here and there, I didn't think we'd been loud or bothersome. None of the neighbors complained, but my friendly neighbors' weird behavior started a day after that party. Now, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be a bother either. But every time you walk in my yard at night, the light turns on, and it's right next to my window. I was about to go to sleep. It was maybe 1 in the morning when it popped on. It's not so sensitive that it would notice raccoons, so I instantly checked my yard to see what triggered the light. I saw my neighbor walking through my yard, picking up random stuff I'd forgotten to pick up in the day following the party. Mostly plastic beer cups and maybe a hot dog plastic packaging or 2. I'm usually cleaner than that, but the day after the party, I had a ton of stuff to do, and I wasn't home until late in the evening. I promised myself to pick it up the next day, but I guess my neighbor couldn't wait that long, so he picked it all up for me. When I asked him about it the next day, he laughed and said he sometimes has insomnia, and saw that I was out all day. He said it was just a tiny neighborly thing to do, and hoped that it didn't bother me. He just wanted to help after all. I thanked him awkwardly and warned him about the light, but I did say I was grateful. All in all, I tried not to think of this as weird, and maybe the guy was just lonely and needed friends. Never seen a wife out of his door, so perhaps he lived alone. I wasn't in the market for new friendships, but he was friendly, and I didn't want to ruin our good neighbor relationship. The whole cleaning was just nice, right? But then, the first of my friends disappeared. It was about 4 days after the party. He didn't show up to work, and his girlfriend, Clara, called all of us asking if we'd seen him. She was trying to contact Matt and said his phone was turned off, which was very unlike him since he liked to spend all of his time playing gacha games on his phone, and usually always had it on him. She was worried because she said Matt told her it felt like he was being followed. I asked her if they fought, and she said no, everything was going well, which is why she was so worried. I tried to reassure her and even went to the police with her. Then we met with everyone else and tried to figure out where Matt went. We went different ways. Clara went to Matt's parents, Robert attempted to contact a few of Matt's colleagues, and Jackson drove up to Matt's family cabin, 2 hours north. None of us found a thing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. The following week was difficult, and each passing day another reminder that Matt was not coming home. It fucked me up. Hell, it fucked all of us up. Another week passed, and we still had no news of Matt. Meanwhile, my neighbor's insomnia kept acting up. He picked up my trash and put it on the side of the road for me in the middle of the night. Another night, I saw him water my plants. Now, I had indeed forgotten to do that, but with my friend's disappearance, I had other things on my mind. Every day there was something new. He refilled my bird feeder, pruned my shrubs, hell, basically took care of everything I was putting aside. I couldn't say I was angry about the help. I mean, Lord knows I needed it. But it was not something I expected from a neighbor. I mean, I would have asked my mom about it since she likes gardening. But what creeped me out the most is that he was always doing it at night. Like, if he wanted to help me, why not just knock on my door and offer to help? Why do it in the dead of the night when I can't even thank him? The police questioned my friends and me, but the case wasn't progressing. Another week passed without a sign of Matt. Now, a week ago, it had been 3 weeks since Matt's disappearance. Robert was the next to go. Jackson was beyond himself. He was completely inconsolable. You see, Robert and Jackson were high school sweethearts. They'd been together for 16 years, and they're the oldest pair in our friend group. Clara and Matt had been together for years, but the seniority belonged to Robert and Jackson. His disappearance also made no sense whatsoever. They were planning to get married next July. Even if their relationship had ups and downs, they stuck together. Always. It wasn't like Robert to leave without telling Jackson about it. Anyway, I couldn't sleep anymore. I was barely getting better about Matt, but now I had to mourn again for both of them. I'm not a crier, but I felt my heartstrings were being tugged a little too much with all that's been happening around me. I might have let a tear of frustration roll down my cheek as I laid in bed, unable to sleep. I know I punched one too many holes in the walls of my room, but it's my house. I can wreck it if I want to. So I took a week off of work. I told my boss about the disappearances, how I couldn't focus, and I needed a mental health break. My boss is great. She allowed it instantly and even told me if I needed more time, just to let her know. 'Cause disappearances, well, they're not like deaths, you know? When you lose someone in death, you have a funeral, and then you could start the process of healing. When someone disappears without a trace, without a reason, without a note, you can't close that door. They're not dead, and they might come back. But until they do, you're stuck in that what do I do zone where you wonder if it's your fault or why you're not enough for them to stay. Now, I didn't do anything to Matt or Robert that would warrant them running away without a note, and I'm pretty sure neither Clara nor Jackson did anything in their relationship that would explain why they've gone. The only other reason that came to my mind was terrifying. A serial killer on the loose targeted my friends, and I had reasons to believe my overly friendly neighbor knew more about this. See, nobody is that nice without a reason. When Clara disappeared 5 days ago, 2 days of my mental health week break, I broke down. Clara was my childhood friend, the one I'd known the longest in our group. I've been in almost all the same classes as her since, well, forever, and I couldn't handle losing her too. I don't know what happened, but when her mom called me and asked me if I'd seen her, I felt in my heart that she was gone. Like, gone. That I would never see her again. I didn't have that feeling for Matt or Robert, but with Clara, I just knew. When I hung up the phone, I started drinking. I didn't want to think about anything. My heart was in too much pain. I mean, how are you supposed to feel when you lose 3 of your friends in less than a month? In hysterics, Jackson called me later that day, accusing me of things that made no sense to me. He said I was selfish, jealous, envious, that he couldn't prove anything, but he knew it was me, that it had to be me. My throat tightened. I was in shock. Either he was losing it, or he was right, and I was at fault. When I finally managed to speak, I told him to calm down, that I loved him, and Robert, and Clara, and Matt, and I felt my heart breaking when Jackson choked on a sob and asked me to bring them back. And I said I couldn't. I had no idea where they were. And then he hung up. I listened to the sound of silence. My phone stuck to my cheek for a solid 2 minutes. I eventually dropped my phone and picked up the bottle again. I went outside in my yard. It was getting late. I sat down in one of my plastic chairs and kept drinking. I think I passed out right there after finishing 3/4 of this bottle of gin. And I woke up as I felt I was being dragged, but I was still too drunk off my wits to even open my eyes. All I could hear is, "Oh, you're gonna be fine, I promise. You're strong. You're gonna get over this. You're so great. I swear." I fell unconscious again after hearing those words. When I woke up, I was in my bed, still fully dressed except for my shoes. My head pounded and I barely had time to move. I grabbed for the trash can by the side of my bed. I didn't eat a lot the previous day, but that didn't stop my stomach from throwing up several times. It burned the back of my throat, and my eyes watered with each cramp. After I was done, I laid back down, and freezing sweat covered my entire body. Not a good morning at all. My hands hurt too, so I looked at them and noticed I had a lot of dirt caked under my nails. Did I rake the ground as I was carried back inside? No. Wait, did someone carry me back inside? It must have been the neighbor. I picked myself up, took a sip of water, and ignored my stomach. And then I made a beeline for my neighbor's door and slammed my fist on it. It took about 20 seconds for him to open the door, and I unleashed hell on him. I said it was his fault, that he was a creepy old bastard and that I knew it was him, that whatever he was whispering to me that night was proof, and that I was going straight to the police. He kept smiling. "Hey, bud. Why don't you take a look in your basement?" he told me, stopping me right in my tracks. "My basement?" I asked, confused. "Yes, your basement," he answered diligently, still standing straight and utterly unaffected by my accusations. I stared at him like a deer in the headlight and felt the blood drain from my body. I walked back to my house on shaky legs, my heart skipping every other beat. Once I was inside, I locked all of my doors, closed my curtains, and went down to my basement. I never really took the time to check it out. I bought the house about 6 months ago, and it was just the place where I put the boxes I still had to unpack. I mean, yeah, that was lazy, but too many dishes and not enough space. And I didn't take the time to clean those boxes yet. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. I found a door behind a bunch of empty boxes. There was a dark stain in front of it, and my heart tightened, then accelerated to the point I was convinced I was going to have a heart attack right then and there. When I opened the door, I realized it wasn't any ordinary door. It was a cold room, and it was almost full. My friends and some older corpses were there, and now I knew why I instantly felt that Clara was gone. Her heart was missing. There was an open wound in her chest where I could see her ribs and organs, but not her heart. I might not be a doctor, but I've seen enough gory shows in my life to know where a heart is and what it looks like. I couldn't remember anything, but now that I saw them in the flesh, I felt relieved. It was like I was just now realizing that I didn't have to mourn. I closed the door and walked back upstairs. Then I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and decided to call my boss, telling her I would be back to work the next day. She asked if I was okay, and I said I just needed to keep my head busy and that I missed working. That being away wasn't helping me in the way I wanted, and that work was the only place I'd be able to feel normal again. She said if I was sure, I was welcome, of course. Once I hung up with her, I decided to pay another visit to my neighbor. This time, I didn't have to knock. He opened the door as soon as I reached it, and he let me in. He let me in, despite knowing. "How did you know?" I asked my overly friendly neighbor. He smiled, his laughing blue eyes piercing through me. "You're not the first neighbor I help." You know, he's right. I am going to be fine.